Hello, welcome back to the channel. This is episode 3 of How Do Rockets Work. As you can see from the board, we're going to be doing something a little bit different today. We're going to be taking a walk in the space race. I'm doing this because I'm going to do a small series on some of the more important rockets that have been developed in the past, the present, and some possible ideas that people had for rockets that were never done. The reason for this is I'm just going to take a small break from mechanics because one, I'm going to be doing a lot of research right now, and also I'm using this as a time to give some of the viewers a break because listening to a guy drone on about mechanics for like, I don't know, 2 hours is pretty boring. So I'm going to be taking a small break and we're going to go do some history. All right, let's get started. So in 1926, this was like the start of modern rocketry with Dr. Robert Goddard making the first liquid-fueled rocket. Obviously, his rocket, by today's standard, is very primitive, but the way it worked is very simple. You'd have gasoline coming from this bottom tank here, and it would go up through this tube up to here, and in this picture, obviously, injectors aren't shown, but it would be injected into a combustion chamber, along with liquid oxygen, which would come from a tank here, and again also would get injected into the chamber, and then they both combust. Now, this is pretty unique because this is a gasoline-powered engine. We don't really see those much in the aerospace area, and this was a pressure-fed engine, so the whole time this engine was running, it was getting backfilled by a pressure gas, which is pretty common actually, and it's a strategy that's still used. Yeah, that's basically the start of modern rocketry, and as you can see between the next two, there's been quite a jump, and this is to let rocketry as a field develop. So the next one we're talking about is Sputnik, and that was the first man-made satellite ever to be launched into orbit. It was launched by the USSR on the 4th of October in 1957, and it was launched atop a R-7 Semyorka. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, I'll be honest. This rocket had one stage and 4 boosters. So I guess before I get into it, you'll see really soon the kind of different approach that the USSR and the USA took for their rockets. But in the 4 boosters that the Semyorka used, it was an RD-170, which is their kind of first proficient engine, and it was a gas generator cycle. So if you watch my last video, you'll know that means that we had oxidizer and fuel going to a separate turbine, spinning up the pumps to pump the fuel and oxidizer into the main turbine, with the fuel and oxidizer burned to make the second turbine spin, just being dumped overboard. That is the mechanism in this RD-170. And an interesting thing about the RD-170 is it has 4 nozzles, and the reason that the USSR did this is because their engines were having a lot of problem with combustion instability, and the way that they solved this problem was just by having 4 combustion chambers, because then you could split it up into kind of 4 smaller nozzles for the fuel, for the expanding gas to go out of, right? So that was their solution to combustion instability, and it was very successful actually. They used this strategy a lot, so you can see in some of the later designs, you can still see there's a lot of nozzles at the bottom. Those aren't actually separate engines, they're all part of the same assembly, but they have multiple combustion chambers, multiple nozzles. Getting back to this one, it was powered by, the boosters were powered by an RD-170, which burned Carolox in the gas generator cycle. The difference is, the normal gas generator cycle, where you have part of the fuel going to power the pumps, wasn't developed quite yet. So what they used is, they used hydrogen peroxide, and they ran it above a catalyst, and this creates hot steam, because hydrogen peroxide, when in large purity, likes to just disintegrate into steam, hot steam. So they use this hot steam to power the pumps, to power the fuel and oxidizer going into the booster stage, which is pretty interesting. And it's a strategy that's used quite a lot in early rocketry. And then in the Soviet rockets, they have this thing called a Korolev cross. And the way a Korolev cross works is you have your rocket go up, right? And eventually, because you have 4 boosters, you will have kind of an X made midair as all the boosters fall down and your core stage comes through. And that's a staging event where these 4 here, so there's 2 shown, obviously we can't really show a 3D rocket on the board, but there's 2 on this side and again, it's going to be mirrored on the other side, right? So you'll have another 2. And all 4 will fall off at the same time, and because they're all 90 degrees from each other, you'll get like an X falling or cross falling down. And it's called a Korolev cross. And once those fell, you have the RD-108, which is another Keralox gas gen hydrogen peroxide powered engine. It burns at a slightly less powerful thrust, and that's because it's not vacuum optimized, but it's optimized for higher atmosphere flight. So the bell is a little bit bigger, and again, we'll get into this type of stuff when this small series is over and we get back into mechanics. I've got a couple videos lined up, like injectors, combustion chambers, why rockets don't melt, those type of videos. So you can see that I have the thrust values written out. These are at sea level, so this one will be a little bit lower because it's not optimized for sea level. And in total, this rocket was 29 meters tall. Following up on that, we have the Vostok 1, which was launched on the 12th of April, 1961, and it is the first man in space, which is Gagarin. This rocket was 30.8 meters tall, so we're getting pretty big already. And just like the last one, we have 4 boosters, right? You can see the similarities. I chose to rotate it a little bit better because I think this angle shows the boosters better, and probably should have done it on here as well. And again, the boosters are RD-107s, just like this one. And we have a first stage of, again, a 108. But this rocket has a second stage right here. So, what this part right here is, I'll just do a quick arrow to it, that's called an interstage. So in the middle of the flight, this kind of cross would fall down. So in a flight, you'd have, let me just draw a quick model. You'd have this left over, because inside of this fence gate structure, I guess you could call it, there's a rocket inside of this tank, right? So this whole thing falls away and you're left with kind of this happening, right? And this would fall down as this ignites. And that is a staging event, so this whole thing kind of drops down, and it's just dropped. Whereas this little piece here can fly off, and this is where Gagarin was in the mission. And now we have Mercury Redstone 3, which was launched just a few weeks later on May 5th, 1961. This is the first American in space, and they used a Mercury Redstone rocket to launch it, which is kind of, as are all of these 3, kind of a reused ICBM. They're basically ICBMs, but made for space flight. So they're a little bit more powerful, they're rated better, especially these 2. They're rated for human flight, not for missile flight. So that means all the components are much more reliable. This rocket was a little bit smaller than Vostok. It is 25.4 meters tall, and actually is a single stage. Now, it's not a single stage to orbit, but it is a single stage to a suborbital trajectory. And what that means is, say if this was the Earth right here. I know, I'm drawing it flat, don't kill me. This is the top of the atmosphere. The trajectory goes like this, right? So when you're above here, this is a Kármán line. When you're above here, you're in space. And that is what the Mercury Redstone did. It got you above the Kármán line in one stage, and it uses a A7 engine, which is a liquid oxygen and ethyl alcohol engine. And yes, this is alcohol, like the type you drink. They had problems with people drinking the rocket fuel, which is pretty funny. And just like what the Soviets did, this is also powered by a peroxide catalyst pump. Yeah. The next rocket we have is, or the next mission we have is the Luna 9. And this was launched on the 3rd of February, 1966. And this is the first spacecraft landed on the moon. So before this, we've had spacecraft hit the moon really hard, especially by the Soviets. They but they wanted to get data about the moon. So they would, push probes into the moon. This is the first time we've had a spacecraft land on the moon softly, and this is also the first time that we get a picture from the moon, which is pretty amazing. And the way that this probe landed on the moon, it's not shown here because the probe would be in the cargo bay. This probe landed using bags, so it would hit the moon really hard, but because it's got a lot of compression material between it and the moon, the compression takes all the force away from the impact. So it would kind of just bounce and roll around for a little bit and then open up. And you can see the structure is quite similar. This was launched on a Molniya M. Sorry, I'm really bad at pronunciation. Again, it has 4 boosters, RD-107s. This is a different version that they've upgraded to be 818 kilonewtons, whereas the ones before are 813. Not a massive difference, but it is 20 kilonewtons of thrust because there's 5 of them. In the second stage, we have an RD-0110, which is vacuum optimized, and it gives you a solid 297 kilonewtons. And these are both gas generator with peroxide power, right? So it's the same as all these ones so far. Oops, I erased a lot. And then our third stage is a new type of engine. We've got an SL5400, and this is a completely optimized engine. This engine would not work on the surface; it would actually explode. And it provides a thrust of 67.3 kilonewtons in the vacuum. And this one actually uses staged combustion. So we're using oxygen-rich staged combustion now because we needed high efficiency at the top of the rocket here because we need that high vacuum efficiency. And high vacuum efficiency will allow us to make maneuvers in orbit so that we can get to the moon. So I'll just talk about why I chose these 5 before we talk about the next 5. So I chose this one, but it's pretty obvious why I would choose this. I mean, this is the first time we see a proper liquid-fueled rocket. Sputnik's very important. It's the first time we have something orbiting the planet. Albeit it's very small, but it is the first time we have the satellite in orbit of the planet. Vostok 1, again, pretty obvious. The first crewed mission to go into space. And the reason I chose Mercury Redstone is because I like to see the differences in strategy here. Because while yes, both these missions did kind of do the same thing, they both got people into space, obviously they did it differently. And I think that is really important because it shows kind of the independency of both of these designs, right? One design loves to use massive amounts of nozzles on huge engines, and one design likes to use one engine, high-powered, and pretty efficient, right? I mean, you can see that this only burns at 350 kilonewtons, but this thing could burn for a long, long time. It was very efficient in, those days. Now it's not as efficient, but still very good. And Luna 9, well, the moon is pretty awesome, right? And landing stuff on the moon is first. Whoever lands the stuff on the moon first is it's pretty cool, right? And also because, again, it shows differences between these two. Alright, I'm going to flip the page, and this will be later in the space race type of missions. Alright. So, starting off with Gemini 8, which was a mission launched on 16th of March 1966. So not too far after Luna 9. And this is the first docking that's ever happened in space. So docking is like, it's really hard. I was gonna make an analogy there, but I would have used finding a needle in a haystack. It's really overused, right? But essentially, you have two crafts. You have one craft in orbit of Earth, right? And it can be, and it's gonna be really tiny compared to Earth, like not even visible. And you have another craft also in orbit of Earth, and now you want these two crafts to meet and not slam into each other, right? I mean, that's really, really hard. And this is the first mission where we've done it. If you've ever played Kerbal Space Program or any space simulators, you'll know exactly how hard docking is, and I might even make a series on the channel where I kind of talk about what I'm doing while playing Kerbal Space Program. I think that might be quite fun. But anyways, going back to the video. The Gemini mission was launched on a modified Titan II rocket, which is an ICBM. It is 33 meters tall, and it has 2 stages. Its first stage uses an LR-87 AJ7. I know, amazing names. And we've switched to a new fuel other than ethyl alcohol. We've switched to Aerosine 50 and dinitrogen tetroxide. What Aerosine 50 is, it's the hydrazine and unsymmetric dimethylhydrazine mixture in a 50-50 ratio. Sorry, I always take a glance at that and I have to remember what it is. But these are hypergolic fuels, so the moment they touch, they'll spontaneously combust, which makes the engines very, very reliable, right? There's no ignition that needs to happen. The liquids touch and they go, right? And that makes it pretty reliable, and they're very powerful fuels. Like, these are nasty, nasty things. I mean, they're corrosive, but, I mean, they're usable, but they're very corrosive, right? I mean, there is a leak of this which completely destroyed an entire rocket with just a leak of some of the propellants for not even too long. The second stage uses the same propellants. It uses an LR91 AJ7, and it provides a thrust of 440 kilonewtons, whereas the first stage provides a thrust of 1900 kilonewtons. Same fuel, and both of them are gas generator engines. And this is not powered by peroxide anymore. So we have realized, at this point in time, we've realized, wait a minute, why are we using extra propellants on board to spin the turbine when we have such powerful, high energetic rocket fuel next to us? Might as well just burn the rocket fuel and make the turbine spin, right? And that's exactly what they did here. Now, getting on to the big boy, this is what everyone wants to see, right? Apollo 8 and Apollo 11. So we're going to start with Apollo 8. Apollo 8 was launched on December 21st of 1968, and it is the first manned flight around the moon. Let's just get to the beast that launched it, right? The Saturn V, which still remains as the most powerful launch vehicle ever constructed. And my rendition of it doesn't really do it justice at all. I highly recommend you watch a video of it launching, or at least watch a video of a breakdown of it. In the first stage, you have 5 F1 engines, and these are the most powerful rocket engines ever built. Nothing has topped them, not even the newer engines. However, they're not as efficient as the new engines, but they are much, much more powerful. And they provide a thrust of 6.6 meganewtons. Not kilonewtons, meganewtons. And remain to this day the most powerful liquid single combustion engine ever built. And we have 5 of them. On our second stage, we have 5 J2 engines. Oh, one thing real quick. These burn Kerolox in a gas generator cycle. Just wanted to get that through. In our second stage, we have 5 J2 engines. The J2 engines are a Hydrolox gas generator engine. So, if you remember from the video when I was talking about fuel-rich stage combustion, you do need a different hydrogen pump for this gas generation. Even if it is not staged combustion, you still need a different hydrogen pump for these engines. So you have to bring in the seals and the safety measures, which I will make a video on. I swear, I will make one on eventually. These each provided a thrust of 1 meganewton each. And in our third stage, we have just one J2 engine, gas generator, 1 meganewton, same model as the previous one. It's 110 meters tall in total, absolute Goliath of a rocket. If you want, I can do a video where I compare it to Starship, the SLS, and the N1, which are kind of rockets around its size. So I think that might be fun if you want me to do a video on that. Now we're going to go to Apollo 11, launched on the 16th of July, 1969, and this is the first ever manned landing on the moon. This is the Apollo lunar module. I've tried to draw it as best as I can, but it's kind of hard to draw. And it's got 2 stages to it. It's got the descent stage, so this is the stage from when you're landing onto the moon. And this means that the rocket needs to be highly throttleable, right? Because you need to do high thrust at the beginning and lower the thrust as you go to the ground, because you don't want to constantly have high thrust, otherwise you'll push yourself off the ground. But you also don't want to have too low of a thrust, because if you have too low of a thrust, then you won't be able to slow yourself down and you'll crash into the ground. Both of those are unideal and will eventually lead to a rapid unplanned disassembly. So this engine that they came up with is a throttleable hypergolic engine, and it uses the aerosine, which it uses the same compound as this, aerosine and dinitrogen tetroxide. A lot of people will just call it nitrogen tetroxide. It provides a thrust range from around 4.7 kilonewtons to 30.3 kilonewtons. Now, the reason it doesn't go to 0 is because you can just shut the engine off. Yeah, that is the descent engine, which has to be, highly throttleable, able to restart multiple times during the mission. This thing is rated for 2 restarts, but can do up to 4. This engine right here. Well, that's actually the nozzle, but you get my point. And then under this area here, because the way the lunar module works, right? This kind of section gets left onto the moon. What I'm covering up with my hand gets left on the moon. And this little section will go back up into orbit around the moon and then meet up with the capsule left in the moon by the Saturn V. The ascent engine is a pressure-fed hypergolic engine, same fuels as before, and it's 16 kilonewtons. The reason we're using hypergolics is because they're very reliable, right? No igniters needed. You just mix the fuels and bye-bye, right? If you want, I can also make a video detailing exactly how the Apollo missions went in terms of, because just launching like this and then coming back would be really hard. So what I mean by that is, if this is the moon, or if that's the Earth and this is the moon, there's 400,000 kilometers here, right? And we can't just do a rocket like this. We can't just do a rocket, okay, maybe we'll drop a stage here, we'll land and come back, drop a stage here, maybe drop a stage here too, right? You can't really do that because that takes a stupid amount of thrust. So in a really high level, what the Apollo program did is it launched it launched like the top part of this, which went into orbit around the moon, and this part would detach and it would make a landing. And here's where the Gemini comes back into play. You launch back off the moon, and then you dock with the remaining part of the Saturn V, and then the whole thing comes back to the moon, comes back to Earth. Now that sounds like it has so many more extra steps, but in reality, this type of landing is a lot more efficient because you're only bringing down this. And this is only like 7 meters tall. Now, it's not small, but it's not as bad as bringing a whole part of this rocket down, because then you have to break the whole part of the rocket up, right? So that's how they kind of that's the clever way that the engineers and NASA got around the way of doing a direct ascent and descent. The next milestone that we have is Salyut 1, which was launched on 19th of April 1971. It's the first human crewed space station. This was launched on a Proton K, which is still in use today, actually. It's still being manufactured. And it's kind of a beefy boy. I don't have height measurements, actually. I just realized that. I'll put them in the description, sorry. Or in a pinned comment. But the first stage has 6 RD253s, and these are all oxygen-rich stage combustion engines. So you'll know that oxygen-rich stage combustion engines means that the turbines have to sustain pretty ridiculously high temperatures. And that is pretty amazing that they were able to do this back in 1971. And each of these engines provide a 1.7 meganewton thrust. Now, it's fueled by dinitrogen tetroxide, and it reacts hypergolically with unsymmetrical dimethyl hydroxide. Oh my goodness. Kind of a mouthful. I'm just going to call it UDMH for now. I say for now, it's kind of already done. And the second stage is 4 RD0210s, and each of those produce 582 kilonewtons of thrust. Same fuel, dinitrogen tetroxide, UDMH. And the third is the same thing, same fuel, also a oxygen-rich combustion engine, and it produces 613.8 kilonewtons. It's very efficient, and yeah, it works. It can get a lot of payload into orbit, and it's still one of Russia's most reliable heavy launchers. Now, going to something that I really tried to draw really well. I don't think I did a great job of it. You can tell what it is, kinda. This is STS-1, which was launched on 12th of April 1981, and it was the first ever space shuttle flight. And specifically this one here is Space Shuttle Columbia. So the boosters, there are 2 solid rocket motors, which was this and this. So if you watch my first video, you know a solid rocket motor is really quite simple. You just have a rod of fuel with a hole in it. You light the fuel on fire. The fuel burns. You can't turn it off, but it's on, right? And these motors produce 13 meganewtons of thrust, which is more than this bad boy. But they're not liquid fueled, so this guy still holds the king in that regard. The fuel used in these is ammonium perchlorate composite propellant. So what that means is they have ammonium perchlorate, plus I think they had alumina metal mixed into it, and then it's composite with a binding agent, and then they pour it into here, and they mill it down, and then you put a hole in it, and then you launch. I can do a video on fuels, or like different types of fuels used in high-end rocketry or model rocketry if you want. I know I keep saying that. Now, these will eventually drop off, right? These 2 boosters will kind of fall off. If you've seen the space shuttle flight, you'll know what I mean. And then this space shuttle engine will take over. I mean, it's been burning the whole time, but it'll take over now as well. And there's 3 engines, and they are RS-25s, which run a fuel-rich stage combustion, and they burn from 1.8 meganewtons at sea level to 2.2 meganewtons in vacuum, right? Because these things have to burn from the sea all the way up to space. So I'll talk about how they did that and why that's actually such a challenge. And these burn hydrolox in a fuel-rich stage combustion. So you'll know if you watch my last video that you need the complicated turbine assembly to make this work. I'm also going to real quick talk about why I chose these ones as well. I chose Gemini because docking is really hard, and it's also needed for these two missions to be successful. Or, well, needed for this mission to be successful. You don't have to dock in this one. But I chose this one because it's really hard. It's quite impressive, docking. Especially considering the technology it had now, right? To put this into perspective, the hardware that launched this rocket, or the computer that made this rocket work is much less powerful than your cell phone, even, right? So to be able to dock with that type of technological limit is pretty impressive. Obviously, the Apollo ones that I chose are pretty obvious. First manned flight around the moon. It's the first time we've ever seen the dark side of the moon in person, which is pretty cool because it orbited. Okay, Apollo 11 is really obvious, right? I mean, first time you've landed on the moon, of course you gotta include that, right? I mean, it's kind of a major accomplishment. Salyut 1, also it's a first, right? So it's the first human crewed space station, and I think that's pretty impressive as well, considering that one of our most prized possessions as humanity is the ISS. So there's that, and then the first space shuttle. Now, the space shuttle wasn't as reusable as NASA wanted, but you have to admit the space shuttle did a lot for the space program and was quite reliable. I mean, obviously there were some fails, but, you know, when you launch something hundreds of times, of course there's going to be a couple fails here and there, however expensive they are. I think the space shuttle was, obviously it wasn't as reliable as they wanted it, but it was still a success in terms of, can we bring stuff up to orbit and bring it down? Yes. Can we keep part of the rocket? Yes. Okay, good enough. Right? I mean, obviously, they couldn't just put it on the launch pad immediately after a mission. We all wanted that. You can't do that. Unfortunately, it has to do refurbishment, but still, I mean, the space shuttle is quite useful. And yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up the video for today. Again, this is only part 1 of the series, and the next part of the series we'll do New Age rockets. So that'll include the Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, New Glenn, Starship, SLS. You know, all the newer rockets that are being developed right now or being flown right now. Yeah, without further ado, I will wrap up this video. I'll just let you take a look at this board real quick if you want to jot down any numbers, jot down any notes. All right, and then I'm going to... Okay, what just happened here? Technical difficulties. And then I'll let you look at this board as well if you want to see anything. Alright. Yeah. I guess that wraps up the video. I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and thank you.